You know, when we think about history, we usually picture kings, queens, big battles, but some of the wildest stories are actually hidden in the day-to-day stuff, especially when you look at the jobs that kids used to have. And let me tell you, some of them were truly disturbing.
So you think your after-school job was rough? I mean, yeah, dealing with rude customers or cleaning out a greasy fryer is no fun. But trust me, by the time we're done here, you're going to look back on those days and think you had it made. Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to count down the top 5 jobs that honestly make flipping burgers seem like a luxury vacation. And we're starting with the horrible, but we're going to end with the absolutely horrific. So you're definitely going to want to stick around for that number 1 spot. All right, kicking things off at number 5 is a job called the whipping boy. Okay, picture this. Your best buddy misbehaves in class, and you're the one who gets punished. That was literally this kid's entire job. So here's how it worked. You couldn't just, hit a prince. That was a big no-no. But what's a tutor supposed to do? Well, their weird kind of genius solution was to assign a whipping boy to the prince. So every single time the royal kid acted up or flunked a lesson, the whipping boy would take the punishment for him.
And we're not talking about a gentle tap on the hand either. No way. These poor kids were beaten with sticks, whipped with leather thongs. They were even forced to kneel on dried corn cobs. I mean, that sounds like the medieval equivalent of stepping on a Lego, right? It was just brutal, everyday stuff for them. But, and this is the wild part, the whole system had a catch. It only worked if the prince actually cared about his whipping boy. So they were usually raised together as best friends. They got the same royal education, same training. I mean, it was a pretty good gig, really. Unless, of course, the prince decided to go through a major rebellious phase. Moving on to number 4. This is a job where an incredible gift came with an absolutely terrible price. We're talking 16th to 18th century Europe, where if you were a young boy with a stunning singing voice, you could become a superstar by becoming what was known as a castrato. So, what was going on here? Well, back then, women weren't allowed to sing in choirs or perform on stage. Big problem, right? How do you get those high notes? They used boys. But of course, a boy's voice deepens during puberty. The solution they came up with was pretty grim. They would surgically castrate the boy before puberty to stop his voice from ever changing. And the procedure itself was just a complete nightmare. It was totally illegal, so it all had to be done in secret in some back room. They'd take boys, sometimes as young as 8, drug them up with opium, or even press on an artery in their neck to make them pass out, and then do the surgery. A lot of these kids just didn't make it.
I mean, the risks were just off the charts. You could overdose on the opium, your heart could just stop. Plus, the lack of testosterone totally messed with their bone development. But if you survived, and if you were good, the payoff was huge. You could become rich and famous. These guys were the rock stars of their day. They had the powerful lungs of a grown man, but with that incredibly high, pure singing voice.
Okay, coming in at number 3 is a job that sounds totally normal, right? The barber's apprentice. You're probably imagining a kid sweeping up hair, learning how to use a straight razor. Yeah, you couldn't be more wrong.
Just look at this. Forget about getting a nice fade or a beard trim. We are talking amputations, bloodletting, pulling teeth. See, back in the Middle Ages, barbers were the surgeons. And you know that red and white striped pole outside a barbershop? Yeah, that's supposed to represent blood and bandages. Fun, right?
So what was the apprentice's role in all this? Well, you'd have kids, I'm talking 6, 7 years old, assisting with everything. They were dressing wounds, helping out in complex surgeries, and yep, sometimes that meant holding a leg steady while the barber sawed it off. And after all that fun, their job was to clean all the bloody tools and mop the floor, all just in time for the next patient to walk in.
All right, we're at number 2 now. For this one, we're going deep into the dark, disgusting, grimy underbelly of Victorian London. Welcome to the world of the tosher. Think of them as treasure hunters in probably the most toxic place you can possibly imagine. So what did a tosher do? They spent their days wading through London's sewers. And I mean literally, wading through raw human waste, sifting through it all, looking for anything valuable they could find and sell. And of course, when you need someone to squeeze into those tiny, narrow, rat-filled tunnels, who better than a kid?
This job was just unbelievably dangerous, even for that time. A sudden rush of water could flood a tunnel and drown you in seconds. The brick walls could collapse and crush you. If you got lost down there in the maze of tunnels, that was it, you were done for. And that's not even getting into the constant threat of diseases like typhoid and cholera, or the giant swarms of rats.
So you've got to be asking, why on earth would anyone do this? The answer, as it often is, comes down to money. On a good day, a tosher could pull in about 6 shillings. Now, I know that probably doesn't sound like a lot to us today,
But check this out. For the working-class folks in Victorian London, 6 shillings was a huge amount of money. It puts you near the top of the ladder. It was enough to make a family feel like sending their kid into a sewer full of filth and rats was a risk worth taking. That really tells you just how desperate things were. And here we are. We've made it to the #1 most horrific job for a kid in all of history. And the crazy thing is, it sounds so simple, almost innocent. The matchstick dipper. It was a factory job that could make your jaw rot and fall right off your face.
the job was pretty much what it sounds like. These kids, mostly young girls, would spend all day dipping little wooden sticks into a chemical mix to make the match heads. Their small, nimble fingers were seen as perfect for the job. The problem was, a key ingredient in that chemical mix was something called white phosphorus. And if you breathe in the fumes from that stuff day in and day out, you could get a horrific disease they called phossy jaw. It would start out feeling like a simple toothache, but then the phosphorus vapor would literally start eating away at your jawbone from the inside. The bone would just decay, it would rot inside your mouth, causing this excruciating pain and horrible disfigurement. In the worst cases, their entire lower jaw would just come off.
And if that wasn't terrifying enough, here is the final, chilling detail. The phosphorus that had seeped into their bones would cause their jaws to glow, a faint, eerie green color in the dark.
And the thing to really wrap your head around is that these jobs weren't some weird fringe cases. They weren't just isolated horror stories. The whipping boy, the castrato, the tosher, the matchstick dipper, these were normal jobs. They were a real functioning part of the economy back then.
So that kind of leaves us with one last question, doesn't it? It's so easy for us to look back and judge, but it really makes you think, what is something we consider totally normal right now that people 100 years from now are going to look back on and just be absolutely horrified by?